Let's Talk Property webinar begins in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we're live.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Property. It's our weekly property thought leadership webinar brought to you every Wednesday at this time by real estate investor and the Eland Property Group. My name is Neil Peterson. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Real Estate Investor, a digital resource platform and Digimag for investors and property professionals looking to succeed in real estate. In fact, this month, REI celebrates 13 years serving the South African real estate industry. So I'm really honored and proud to be your host today. Every Wednesday, we bring you the very latest news, views, insights, and investment opportunities on everything around real estate in South Africa and around the globe. And especially today, everyone is trying to navigate their businesses, investments, and their personal lives through lockdown and COVID-19. And we say this is the place to come for the best advice and insights of the markets and investments, and especially get the views of our expert panelists globally and in South Africa. So we're here to guide you, we're here to educate you, we're here to inspire you, give you access to information, tools, investment experts, and give you advice that can help you navigate your property businesses, your investments, and as I said, to improve your life. So today our webinar topic is offshore property investment with a focus on residency and citizenship by investment. And before I introduce our panelists, I would like to welcome you, the audience. We really look forward to your interaction and participation in today's webinar. So please keep those questions flowing. And to do that, you'll see that there's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And if you want to pose a question to any of the panelists, just identify the panelists, pose a question anytime during the webinar, and we will deal with it in our Q&A session during the webinar. There will also be a poll with various multiple choice questions that will also pop up on your screen periodically during the webinar, and we'll ask you to vote and select your choice, and we welcome your input on that as well. So today I welcome our stellar lineup of international experts. Today we're going to lift the lid on the essential steps and criteria to consider when either to look to invest in offshore property or to consider residency and citizenship by investment. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our expert panelists. And I'm going to ask our first panelist, Daniel, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a little bright and early here in Tampa, Florida, USA. My name is Daniel Ryan. I am Managing Director for Atlantic American Partners, and we do what's called EB-5 Investor Visa Program. It is a program that was created about 30 years ago to create jobs in America from foreign capital, foreign investors, and one investor needs to show proof to create 10 jobs. Our firm is not a developer. We are a private equity and investment banking firm that's been in business for 46 years. We've been involved with the EB-5 for roughly 10 years. We've helped 700 families. We have what's called the I-526, which is the temporary green card. We have a 100% approval rate on that and 100% approval rate on the I-829. We'll get into the details of the process, but we've got a strong proven track record, 35 successful projects, and an excellent reputation. Love to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thanks. It's wonderful actually having you on the show, Daniel. And I know that you've got up very early. I know it's close to 5 o'clock in the morning in Tampa, Florida. So thank you for joining us at that time. We really look forward to your views a little bit later. Right, Amanda, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Neil, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here today. So yes, I'm Amanda Smith. I'm the managing partner of Henley & Partners South Africa. At Henley & Partners, we are the global leaders in residence and citizenship through investment with over 20 years experience. What makes us very unique is that we have over 30 offices worldwide. We always have an office where our clients reside and also an office in the destination country of choice. Besides advising private clients and their families and assisting them through the entire process to obtain alternative residency or citizenship, we also do government advisory work whereby our specialized team advises governments worldwide in terms of how to structure their programs and how to implement, and we assist them with the marketing thereof as well.
Wonderful. Great to have you, Amanda. Thank you very much. And I see you are the rose amongst all the thorns today, so very warm welcome to you. Okay, our next panelist is Richard. Richard, please introduce yourself to everybody, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Neil, firstly, congrats for the 13 years. That's brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
So I'm Richard Heller. I'm based in Mauritius. I head up the PAM Building Mauritius operation here. We've been on the island for over 20 years now, and our major focus has been selling real estate to South Africans and French. A big part of that is the permanent residency component of it, and up to date now we've helped about just less than 1,000 people so far in terms of achieving property investment and residency in Mauritius.
Fantastic, awesome, great to have you, Richard. And yeah, we wonderful. I love your background. I think you've got we're jealous about that little background you have over there. All right. So our next guest is Andrew Rissick. Andrew, can you introduce yourself, please, to the audience?
Thanks very much, Neil. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Neil, thanks very much for having us on this webinar. Always good to work with Real Estate Investor. I'm the Group Commercial Director and a shareholder of Sable International. We're essentially a South African DNA business, although we're headquartered in London, hence the picture of the London Eye, I assume, behind me. I'm not in London. I'm actually currently in the Western Cape. But we're a business that specializes in helping South Africans with all their cross-border needs. From foreign exchange through to wealth planning, tax planning, we do immigration, and in the last sort of 6 or 7 years, we've been very active in the South African territory doing investment migration, residency, and citizenship by investment. So we sort of focus on a holistic approach in helping a client plan, understand their needs, and then plan and execute the plan.
Wonderful. Thanks, Andy. Lovely having you on the webinar. And then, of course, to Malcolm. Malcolm, would you introduce yourself? Last not but least.
Thank you, Neil. And as with everybody else, thanks for including me on the show. And congrats on your anniversary.
Thank you.
It's great to meet with your subscribers today. I think just a little bit about me. I work with a company called New World. I'm a partner. We're focused on developing property in Europe and at the moment very much in Lisbon in Portugal. Better known to many folks is Johnny Rabi, my partner, who's well known certainly in the Western Cape and in South Africa. What makes us excited is the fact that we're able to introduce South Africans directly into the development that we're doing and give them the comfort that they're dealing with people with a track record in South Africa. So great to listen in and hear about all these other spots in the world, and thanks again for inviting me to join today.
Absolute pleasure, Malcolm, and we look forward to hearing more of your insights on getting into Portugal. All right, so we're going to start off with the Q&A, and Daniel, you first up, and I think maybe you can tell us exactly about what is the EB5 program. What is it exactly? Can you explain to the viewer what it is and how does it work?
Sure. In simple terms, the EB5 program was started 30 years ago at a time where the American economy was not doing well. And the first George Herbert Walker Bush president came up with this as an idea to create jobs. It was a job creation program. So in essence, EB5 is a job creation opportunity for people around the world that have money to invest in America to create jobs in America. And in return, they can obtain residency. In simple terms, that's what it is. And essentially, what we do is we act as a fund manager to make sure that the investor goes through the process. We make sure that we invest the money to create more than 10 jobs. We create on average about 20 jobs per investor. But essentially, it's a job creation program that allows people all over the world to invest with us. And after we show proof that 10 jobs have been created, in about a 2-year period, you can actually move to the United States. And then about 3 to 5 years thereafter, you'll receive a permanent green card, and you can thereafter apply for citizenship. And by the way, dual citizenship is allowed in America with South Africa.
Okay. So maybe, I think, Daniel, tell us a little bit about what have been the biggest challenges to serve the EB5 program, specifically now in a post sort of COVID-19 era? What have been their challenges?
Like all of us, the personal touch, when you're investing, the investment amount, two issues came to fruition in the last 9 months for us. Was COVID, number one, for sure. And number two, the investment increased from 500,000 to 900,000. So it's been, it's reduced our market potential as far as investors go. But the biggest challenge, quite candidly, Neil and panelists, and I'm sure all of you feel this way, we love meeting people face to face. As Neil knows, I spent a lot of time in Cape Town and Johannesburg and quite frankly all over Africa. And I lived in Malawi for 12 years, so I feel, and I'm married to a Malawian woman, so I feel part African essentially. And I love Africa. So for us, and for me personally, it's been the lack of the ability to get on a plane and come talk with our clients, because that person-to-person contact is critical. When you're investing that sizable amount of money, I want to look eyeball to eyeball with somebody. So that's been a challenge for us.
Okay. All right. So Amanda, can you maybe share just a little bit about what is investment migration actually? Can you just elaborate a little bit on that and share that with our audience?
Yes, certainly. I think to put it simply, investment migration is offshore investment diversification through obtaining alternative residency or citizenship. And there are various reasons why people are looking into doing that. In most cases, the common scenario is just to have a hedge or a plan B in place during uncertain times or for future planning. Of course, there are many other alternative reasons why people are seeking to do that. And then when we look at the term citizenship by investment, that describes the policies of countries in which a foreign person may gain citizenship or residency through making a significant capital contribution to that country. There are several countries around the world that have these programs in place with the reason to attract foreign high net worth individuals into the country in return for citizenship or residency. And of course, the ultimate intention of the country is to build a long-term affinity between the country and highly successful people.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what are the benefits of real estate or property-based investment migration programs?
Sure, there's a number of very big advantages, but the appeal of property-based investment migration program is, of course, that they offer a hybrid investment that includes alternative residency and citizenship, in addition to all the other traditional real estate upsides. So the investor acquires a sizable profit-yielding asset with a unique volatility hedge, which is, of course, increased global access. So our clients that we deal with are mostly interested in real estate-linked investments because, of course, they yield short and long-term benefits. There's then also the aspect of having greater travel mobility. So if we use, for example, a South African passport, whereby the holder can travel to 101 countries visa-free, none of which are, of course, within Europe or, your main centers around the world. If an applicant then acquires alternative citizenship through Malta, they suddenly have access to the world and have 292 destinations.
Wow. Okay, so maybe just run through some of those that give property options as well, because I know we do have quite a strong real estate audience, and real estate tends to be the big #1 investment criteria people look at when they're going offshore. Do you want to maybe just share that?
Yes, certainly. There's an extensive number of citizenship and residency programs around the world. I actually mean that there's about 60% of the EU member states that offer such programs. So when we look at the ones where specifically it's linked to property investment, let's start with Europe maybe first. It's the very famous and popular Portugal Golden Residency Permit Program. The Greece Golden Visa offers a very good property investment to acquire permanent residency as well. Then Malta and Cyprus both offer either a residency program or a European Union citizenship program, which one can also acquire through investing in property. Then Montenegro citizenship program, once again, it's through investment into property. And then when we move over to the Caribbean islands, of course, each and every one of them, that's Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Dominica, they all offer citizenship in a very short period of time based on a property investment. And the important thing is that in most cases, these properties can be rented out, like I said before, so it does provide you with a short and long-term yield. And provided, what the country's requirements are, these properties can, of course, after a couple of years, be sold. So there is a definite return on investment.
Okay, great. So, Richard, you're sitting in, wow, I mean, look at that background you've got over there. I think you make all of us jealous. You certainly made Daniel jealous. He wanted to move from the States onto the island. So, tell us, why is Mauritius so attractive for South Africans?
Yeah, I mean, so Mauritius has a familiarity with South Africans for many, many years. In the last 30, 40 years, they've been traveling here. And when the residency program opened up close to 20 years ago, the first one that we launched was Tamarina Golf and Beach Estate. It was exceptionally well received. And since then, the market has sort of moved to a lower price point recently to $275,000, where foreigners can get permanent residency through property. So we see a combination of the price point, the lifestyle, the ability to hedge the rand, and the fact that it's very close to home. A lot of people still have family at home, and they've got business interests there. So it's quite a nice sort of home away from home from that aspect.
Okay, wonderful. So maybe tell us some of the areas within Mauritius. I mean, I've been on the island a few times. Which ones would you recommend? Which area?
So we made a decision already 10 years ago to focus on the two main areas, which is Grand Bay up in the north and Tamarin on the west coast. And at that time, we saw that the growth in infrastructure, which resonates with people wanting to reside in the country, was happening in those two areas. So, all our chosen products and developers operate in those two areas. And we're seeing an advent of infrastructure. I mean, every year I notice the difference in terms of shopping centers, the availability of anything really you can now get on the island, which wasn't necessarily like that 5 years ago. The growth of the road network, the growth of the international schools. And when I look at the plans, both in Grand Bay and in Tamarin, for the smart city master planning, that's also going to change the dynamic in both those areas. So I think, the long-term growth in both those areas looks good.
Okay. So tell us, how easy is it to settle there, Richard? Because I think that's also the core of what we're discussing here today. People are looking at residency, citizen. How easy is it to get into Mauritius?
Yeah, I think the reality is that if I look pre-COVID at the flight connections from Mauritius, which by and large should come back to normal once things settle down. it makes it a very easy place to commute directly to Europe, directly to London, directly to Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban. So the fact that it's English speaking, the growth of infrastructure makes it a lot more attractive, and the fact that you're close to home does make it easier to settle versus maybe a much more foreign country.
Yeah. So just in terms of limitations for somebody, a South Africa that wants to move, I think if they wanted to have a residency, do you want to maybe, do you have some insight on that?
Yeah, so, the process is very simple in terms of, I always say it's sort of one of the simplest residency programs around. Because you simply, you buy the property at now $375,000 within designated developments. They're called IRS, RES, and PDS developments and Smart City. And as long as you own the property, you and your spouse and your kids under 24 have permanent residency. So you don't have to set one foot in Mauritius, not one day on the island, and you still have the permanent residency.
Okay, excellent. Great. Andrew, especially if we look at now during this time in COVID, and and I think just in South Africa, if we look at the economy, we look at, there's not a lot of good stream news that's coming through. And so maybe just tell us, what are you seeing? What are the reasons that South Africans are considering immigration? And in fact, we did our own poll now, and you probably saw quite in red. There was one in politics, corruption. I don't want it to turn into political and chase everybody away. But maybe you tell us, you in the arena, why? What are those reasons that people are really considering to?
Well, I think, Neil, thanks. That's a good question. I think the poll answer showed that corruption and politics are probably one of the biggest factors that are driving people to consider offshore. But we've seen South Africa for a long time. I think South Africa historically has always been quite politically unstable. We're an emerging market for a long time. There's been uncertainty, and there are all those associated risks. But I think what we've seen with COVID is a surprising it's triggered people. Everyone has a trigger, and something will happen. It could be a crime event in someone's life. It could be a loss of a job. It could be many things that actually force them to make a decision. I think what COVID has done is there's become a massive lack of trust in the government. But I think certainly from my perspective and people who are who sort of well-read and understand the situation, it's economic considerations. We're running into a major debt crisis. We've got a very volatile emerging market currency. So I think, guys who are doing it cleverly are saying we need a hedge, we need an investment hedge. And by the way, if we are looking at hedging and investing offshore, maybe there is a bonus of an extra residency or a citizenship, so we can almost kill two birds with one stone. And I think it's important to understand that one should approach it from an investment perspective. We're talking about real estate investment, and understanding the fundamentals of the country which you're considering. Are the fundamentals good? Is it fundamentally different to what you essentially trying to escape from in SA from an investment point of view? So there are lots of things one needs to consider. But yeah, it's lack of trust in government, I think, is the biggest driver. And COVID has certainly driven that.
Excellent. Okay, so thanks for clarifying that. And then which passport programs seem to be the most popular for South Africans at the moment?
Okay, well, you mentioned passport programs. So I think Amanda differentiated earlier. You get residency by investment, and then you also get citizenship. So the programs where you invest and you get citizenship, in other words, the Malta MIP or the Cyprus program, they're quite substantial investments. A lot of the Caribbean programs, you're getting citizenship. They all quite large investments, and also they will offer a lot more. For instance, if you get a European passport. The residency programs, obviously there's a residence period that you need to be legally resident before you can ever become eligible to become a citizen. But I think that in our opinion, and I mean this is only really from a Sable point of view, Portugal has certainly been the most popular residency by investment program. It continues to be, there's no doubt. You know, I was telling you earlier on, I mean, in the last couple of weeks, I think we've done more than 10 deals in Portugal. So people have now trust the Portugal program. There are a lot of South Africans who've done it. It's a relatively palatable investment. There are challenges around the investment program, but in terms of the citizenship program for ultra high net worths, I think without a doubt, Malta is a really interesting one. Montenegro is a new one. We launched that recently and into our sort of portfolio of services, and we've had a really good uptake. So again, that's a price point consideration. It's much cheaper than, it's not part of the EU. So again, you know, it really depends, A, what someone can afford, and B, what their goals are.
I think Malcolm would be very happy about the Portugal story. So maybe just tell us, what are your key recommendations for anybody considering a plan B or a physical relocation? Because I mean, now you've got to up and move and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, this is quite a traumatic thing.
Yeah, I think the plan, let's talk about a plan B for a start.
Okay.
A plan B is a great product and a great solution for somebody who's well established here, they're doing well, and they're possibly looking at creating an insurance policy or a future sort of escape chute for their children. So one needs to then consider, you know, what the residency or citizenship brings and how that passes down to dependents of the main investor. And the things that people need to consider is, you know, what are the tax implications when you invest in a destination? You know, some countries have got quite benign tax regimes, and they're interlinked quite well with South Africa, where there's a DTA. Other countries, you might get yourself into a situation where understanding what is the inheritance tax if the main investor passes away. There are lots of things, you know, how do you treat that income that you're earning off the investment? There are lots of things. When it comes to a physical move and somebody's saying, listen, I'm out of here, I'm moving, that's a totally different concept. Then it's all about, you know, where do you want to live? Must it be English speaking? Culturally, are you going to fit in? Are you going to make friends? You know, will your kids integrate? How are you going to generate an income? We're coming from a low value currency environment, so our rand doesn't go very far when we're investing offshore. And genuinely, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And we do see a lot of people who make rash decisions. They get emotional when there's a political event, and they go crashing across the world. At the moment, they can't really, but after COVID, they will be again. And they make big mistakes, and these are fundamentally expensive. So I think the real thing is to understand what your objective is, why are you even considering it, and then get advice and go through the entire process of understanding what this thing's really going to cost you, what is it going to give you in terms of investment objectives. That's important, and more importantly, you know, this is the future of your family. You're sending them down a road that's going to determine where they ultimately live and are going to bring up their families, and what is that going to look like?
Right. No, thank you for clarifying that, Andrew. I think it's very well put, and I think you've given some of the people out there some really great food for thought. Malcolm, tell us from your side, should the spend requirement for entry into a residency program, now we're talking obviously in your case specifically in Portugal, should you see that as purely a cost, or is it an investment?
Yeah, Neil, I think that's an important question. You know, I think the various panelists have summed up the situation well. There's not much left for me to say other than, you know, I think there's quite a bit of paralysis analysis when you start to look at all these different countries and the different ways of acquiring residency and or citizenship. You can do it, you know, with as little as 200,000 euros up to 500,000 euros, or I think in the US we now, correct me Daniel, it's up towards the $900,000 mark. There are all these different permutations, and I think it can become quite daunting for anybody looking at this, particularly if you see it in the light of a cost. as opposed to an investment. Because Andrew's made the points which I think are all extremely valuable. It's a big decision to make if you go beyond Plan B. But if you're looking at an insurance policy which really gives you some sort of alternative in an Armageddon type situation, and I think that's been our experience. Andrew's had far more, but our experience over the last number of months with South Africans, we've probably had about R1 billion of investment in our project in Lisbon to date from South Africans. The real question is, I'm taking out an insurance policy and I'm trying to cater in the fact that I might be forced to move for whatever good reason. I think that means make sure your money's going into a safe investment, into an environment where the macro factors are solid. What got us excited about Lisbon 18 months ago when we launched the project, and we did all our due diligence around the property fundamentals. Portugal and Lisbon specifically, and Portugal is Portugal, but you've got to look like anywhere else in the world, you've got to look at the specific city or area where you're planning to invest. Lisbon has achieved a 98% growth, nominal percentage, in residential property prices over the last 10 years. So that's an average of 9.8% per annum. Second only to Berlin. Berlin has achieved a growth of 127%, I think it is, over the same period. The fundamentals looking forward are extremely positive. Savills are saying this is one city amongst 5 others in the world that's got a future right now, post-COVID, and the others being Amsterdam, Berlin, Miami, Paris, San Francisco. These are the tangible realities that I think people must look at when deciding on where they're going to invest, rather than getting sucked into all this, as I said, paralysis analysis. And certainly in the case of Lisbon and Portugal, and Portugal's Golden Visa program has come mainly in 2 places, Porto and Lisbon. They've attracted 5 billion euros of investment since they introduced the program. Investors have done extremely well. If I look at the people from South Africa who bought into our project over the last 18 months, probably 70% have not been attracted by the residency or citizenship option. They've been attracted by the investment fundamentals. And you're talking about a solid, South European city, which has done extraordinarily well over the last number of years, has got a long-term future. And I think those are the sort of things that one needs to be examining, rather than, gee whiz, this one's cheaper than that one, because it's not about cost.
Okay.
Neil, can I contribute
Daniel,
to what
yes,
Malcolm?
you come in then. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I concur with Malcolm. I think that there is so much information out there, and it is easy for analysis paralysis. One thing I wanted to clarify, and I did not state it at the beginning, the EB-5 program in America is a returnable investment. So the EB-5 investor puts $900,000 into a fund that we manage. We develop commercial properties such as multifamily, mixed-use developments, hotels, things like that. In a 5 to 7 year period, we sell these properties and the investor's money is returned. So it's different than the other folks that are on this panel where they actually buy a property for personal investment purposes. That's a critical component that, again, this analysis paralysis, there's so many different variables and so many different countries to think about. I think Malcolm hit on the head. First of all, you just have to look. The first question is, where would you like to live? What are your goals? And most of the clients that we work with, the reason people want to come to America is really 3. 1, the money is returned at a 7 year period. So it's a returnable investment. 2, it's to educate their children in American public schools. And as you know, school fees throughout South Africa are quite expensive at better schools. So here in America, you can go to a public school for virtually no cost in public universities like the University of California, Berkeley, or University of Pennsylvania Wharton School at a relatively low cost. So there's a lot of reasons why people choose where they want to go. And then third, the reason people want to come to America is the economic opportunity to expand their businesses. So they might have a business in Cape Town or Durban or Johannesburg, and they keep their business, but they expand in America because they're now a resident of America and they can expand their business opportunities. So, you know, there's so much to be thought through and so much analysis to perform, but I advise people, you know, think before you say, oh, I can move to X country because it's 250,000 or 350,000. The real question is, do you want to live there for the rest of your life? Number one, or can you have the ability to go back and forth easily if you do decide to become a citizen? And thirdly, what's the economic opportunities after you arrive? You know, if you move to one of these Caribbean countries, what are you going to do for a living? If you don't have, you know, millions and millions of dollars in reserves, eventually your savings is going to dry up and you're going to be looking for some way to pay your monthly expenses. So I just think that it's important to not overanalyze. I think it's critical to get down to the root issues to begin with.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Daniel. Okay, I see there's lots of questions which are flying in over here. And so I'm going to, Malcolm, I'm going to start off with you because we'll get around to everybody. And once again, you know, welcome any input from any of the other panelists if you want to, because I know Andrew and specifically Amanda, you look at a number of destinations, whereas Daniel is sort of US focused and Richard is obviously Mauritian focused and Malcolm is Portugal focused, which, so Malcolm, just the first question, can you elaborate as to how the property finance works? Specifically on your investment, and also what are the tax implications for South Africans? It's almost like that becomes like a standard question I see. If you want to maybe tell us a little bit about that, Malcolm.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Neil. The financing option are, you know, they're quite attractive for South Africans, but having said that, or for foreign investors in property in Portugal, there's opportunity to get loans to value of up to 75%. Interest rates are at an all-time low. We're looking at fixed rates around the 1% mark, floating rates a bit below that, and terms of up to 30 years, depending on age. So there are a number of options and very attractive options for foreign investors in Portugal. And I think that's been one of the major drivers of our success so far in Lisbon and why we're going ahead with our next two projects in the new year. And I must say, sizable projects, you know, 90 million euros is our first one and the two following are a little bit below that. But for a golden visa buyer, of course, everybody will quickly emphasize in Portugal, you need to bring fresh capital of 500,000 euros into the country. So you can't finance that 500 with local bank end user finance loans. You would need to leverage on top of the 500. In fact, more than a couple of our clients have done exactly that, committed the 500,000 to achieve the plan B option. And I want to just stress to Daniel, I think what makes us so different is, and Andrew emphasized it earlier on, this is not about making a decision to immigrate. This is purely about an insurance policy, and you can decide 5-6 years from now whether you want to go across and live there. And at the same time access the educational and healthcare benefits that flow with it, which is enormously attractive to South Africans. On the tax side, there is a double tax agreement between the two countries, which means that as a South African tax resident individual, you'll prepare your tax return at the end of the normal tax year, February, sometime post-February, and you will bring to book in your tax return income that you've earned in Portugal and get relief on the tax that you paid in Portugal. The vanilla tax rate applied to rental income in Portugal for a foreigner is around 28%. So you would earn, let's say, 10,000 euros of income in a year. You would be taxed at 28%, being 2,800 euros. When you prepare your South African tax return, you will recognize that income and get relief on. So for a marginal taxpayer in South Africa paying 44% of tax, your effective tax rate will stay exactly the same because you'll get relief on the 28% and you'll do a top up of the 16%. But yeah, so that's how it works, the tax side.
Excellent. Thanks very much for clarifying that, Malcolm. Okay, Amanda, and it's also related to Portugal citizenship. There's a question for you. How does your investment migration work in regard to Portugal citizenship brackets? Last time I checked, it was 400,000 euros. Is that revised? And I think, Andy, if you want to come and add in after that, you're welcome, because I know you also do. So your input on that there, Amanda.
Yes, certainly. So first of all, what is important for the audience to note is that the Portugal Golden Residence Permit Program is essentially a residency program, a 5-year residency program. And there are a variety of investment options that an investor can choose. The most popular one, which more than 95% of investors choose, is through the acquisition of real estate. The minimum investment criteria is 500,000 euros. However, there are further kind of regulations. So if an investor purchases a property in what is called a less densely populated area in Portugal, then the investment is reduced by 20%, so they can then invest at a 400,000 euro level. And then the requirements go even further, so that if an investor purchases a property that is older than 30 years, have been renovated and refurbished, then an investor can purchase at 350,000. And then lastly, if there's a property that is older than 30 years, have been refurbished and renovated, and is also located in a less densely populated area, the investment threshold is then 280,000 euros. So lastly, in terms of citizenship inquiry, as I said, it's ultimately you start off with a residency program. But once a holder had their residency permit for 5 years, they become eligible to apply for citizenship. Once you're eligible, it is important as well to note that there are further requirements to meet when you apply for citizenship. And one is that the applicant needs to be able to communicate, read and write in Portuguese at an elementary A2 level. And of course, the applicant also needs to prove and show their ties that they form to Portugal. Now that can include, such things like I'm owning a property, I have a bank account with certain investments, perhaps I've made a charitable contribution in the country, joined some social clubs, all of those things that can really prove to the Portuguese government that there's a real intention to become a citizen.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that, Amanda. Andrew, there's a question specifically, and I don't know if it's because we opened up the whole political corruption can of worms, but it's there. It says there, do you think that the land redistribution discussion change how South Africans view the future of property in South Africa? So it's more of a property-related question, and I'll probably open up to the rest of the panel if you want to comment on that one. But for whatever reason, somebody has asked you that question, Andrew. What are your thoughts around that?
Must be all that political commentary that I made in the public domain.
You opened the can, Andrew.
Yeah, look, I think it just depends who you speak to. It's a very emotive issue, the redistribution and this, acquiring property without compensation. It's a very delicate subject in South Africa. I certainly do think I think it contributes towards the sort of concerns that people have around policy stability in South Africa. I think, if you talk to people quietly, they say the ANC will never do it. Other people are absolutely convinced. Social media is a terrible thing. I think there's a lot of fake news and there's a lot of I think, quite bad opinion But it's certainly a consideration, and it's something that I think people do need to be cognizant of. But it would be lovely if the South African government behaved like a lot of these governments that we're talking about, where they're doing everything to attract foreign capital investment. We seem to be quite good at expelling it. So there might be a change of heart in future. Let's see.
Okay, great. Richard, okay, you're on the beautiful island of Mauritius there now. So there's quite a lot of questions for you. I think they like the background of yours and the beach, the beach scene. But anyway, so is a person able to finance part of the investment for residency to Mauritius? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. You can mortgage part of the property in Mauritius. So as part of your $375,000 starting buy-in for residency, you can mortgage up to about 70% of that with the local banks. We normally tell clients and suggest to clients to sort of pitch it at the 50% mortgage level, so that if they're buying it from a rental perspective, the rental yield can then cover the mortgage payment, and they're sort of cash neutral, after the years plays out. So it is one of the, I think, the fewer schemes where you can mortgage a big portion of that buy-in.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we've got, I'm going to come back to you, Daniel, because Daniel, I think maybe you probably need to tell us, in South Africa, we get exposed to, a lot of programs that are, put in front of us. And in the US, there are a number of programs, and they're different players and what have you. So maybe tell us, what is the Atlantic American Partners? What differentiates you from a number of the other EB5 programs that we actually see?
That's a great question, and it's a really quite simple answer. First of all, there are a number of EB5 entities that are developers that are tapping into the EB5 program, and their interest is in finding low interest equity funding, and their interest with representing the investors are not necessarily aligned, because they're interested in making most of the profit for themselves. And if they run into trouble, the investors, in many cases, and folks out there that are watching, there have been some terrible examples of misappropriation of funds by developers that have used EB5 money for the wrong purpose. It was intended to create jobs mostly in lower income, higher unemployment areas. But for example, there's a project in New York City called Hudson Yards. Some of you might have heard about it. It's right in Manhattan. That by no means is considered a high unemployment rural area. That's in the heart of Manhattan, the heart of financial district, and the company that's behind it is now in trouble. So what separates us is we are not a developer. We're a fund manager, as I mentioned. We manage funds. We partner with the best developers in the United States, and we're the money watchdogs. We're the money police. We actually sit on the boards of these entities that we form, and we make decisions. We don't allow the developers to spend money over a certain threshold to make sure that we cover and protect our investors. And that's really, when it all comes down to it, when people do their research on companies that are involved in the EB5 investment program, what people will find is that we are independently looking out for our investors, because we're really fund managers, not developers. And 90% of the folks in this industry in America are property developers using the EB5 funding mechanism. Now, on top of that, let me add one other, because it's important. The other thing is we offer what's called a diversified portfolio, which means each of our EB5 clients becomes a limited partner in a portfolio of 3 to 4 properties, similar to a mutual fund. So essentially, we will have like a hotel, student housing, luxury apartment. We combine it into one fund. We create a fund, and our investors become limited partners in that fund. And when we sell the fund, they also not only will they receive, when we liquidate the fund, will they receive their principal of $900,000 back. They will also receive a capital gains proportionate to their limited partnership position. And that's really what makes us different. People make money on top of the principal repayment. They make money by being a partner with us as the capital gains on a property is sold. A good example, we built the apartment complex in Tampa, for example, for about $65 million a few years ago, and we've recently sold it for $120 million. So our partners shared in that capital gain.
Okay. Just on the allowance side, I know the allowance has increased quite significantly, 500 to 900,000. We don't know whether it's to fund Trump's new election campaign. And I want you to ask a question. It's a very unfair one, and it is Trump or Biden?
No, listen, since Andrew opened up the can of political worms, we might as well just, be fair about it and go global. Here's the short and I'm going to be politically correct. I think what you will find is that the COVID, once COVID is taken care of, it will, we believe, and we, again, we've been in the private equity investment banking business for 46 years. Our research tells us it's not going to make much of a difference either way. In fact, if Biden is elected, some people think the economy will benefit simply because we'll have probably improved stability on a global basis, perception-wise. On the flip side, if Trump is elected, the policies that Trump's trying to implement economically will be, it won't have any greater negative or positive effect. It will continue. Prior to COVID, things were going very well here. So, it's one of those issues where he's a very volatile figure. We all know that. I personally, I don't want to get into my personal opinion because it's not really relevant, but I will say that I know, speaking of for all Americans, we're looking forward to having this election and having it settled once and for all, and having COVID settled and have a vaccine so we can all get back to having a normal life. And that, I think, is really more important than any election.
Excellent. Great stuff. Nicely put there, Daniel. Okay, I've got a question both for Andrew and Amanda. I'd like both of you just to comment on this for you. And it's, what would you recommend for a person that already has an EU passport? Is it advisable to make the jump? Andrew, would you first and then Amanda?
That is a great question. And that is a question that everybody who's looking to do one of these programs with a South African passport should really ask themselves. Is if you've got an EU passport, you can get up tomorrow and move. And that's the real consideration. And my advice would be, an EU passport is a great insurance policy because you can go and live and work anywhere in the EU. So you've already ticked that box. So your next question is, what is your objective? Why are you even considering moving? And what is it going to look like? And just speaking from experience, I've lived in the Netherlands for 2 years. I lived in the UK for 10 years. I am a dual citizen. I live in South Africa. I have no intention of leaving. But the thought of leaving is daunting. So it's the same as if you up sticks and you move from Cape Town to Johannesburg for a new job. The only difference now is you've got a border in between. It's a different culture, and there's a lot of extra cost. So when you're young, it's easy. The older you are, you really have to be careful because you start having a narrow sort of gap at the end to rebuild capital if you make a mistake. But what I would do if I was a South African with an EU citizenship and I was considering moving, I would ask myself all those questions about what does my career look like, why am I doing it, is this going to help my children? We see a lot of people who've got British passports with kids sort of still under the age of 18, where if they move there for a period of 3 years, the kids can get British passports. Some people will actually make that sacrifice and make the move. But to up sticks and go and live in the UK for 3 years is a really, really big decision. We've seen people go to Australia through whatever right they have and come back and say it really isn't what we expected, and they've moved back. So again, it's all those questions. Do you want to live there? Is the culture good? What are you going to miss here? Your family, the mountains, just the great attitude of South African people. So
excellent.
Give me a
Great.
call.
Amanda, you want to weigh in here?
Yes. Just in addition with what Andrew already said, absolutely. If you're a South African and you have a European passport, the difference, of course, is it a European passport or a European Union passport? Because, of course, if it's a European Union passport, then you have the choice of 27 EU countries that you can choose from. And I absolutely agree with Andrew. You need to consider what your ultimate goals is. Choosing one of the European Union countries where, from a language point of view, you can easily integrate, the safety. You need to look at the healthcare system. Definitely, you need to look at, out of all the European Union countries, which one will be providing with the most beneficial tax regime. If you have children, what are their educational opportunities? So there are so many different factors that one needs to consider before, of course, you make such a move. Of course, if it's not a European Union passport, it's difficult if you're not entirely sure. Then one can also consider alternative options. If European Union perhaps is not a draw card for you, then it would be worthwhile to consider alternatives, whether it's immigration that you are looking into, if Australasia perhaps is an attraction for you, whether you perhaps want an access into the US. It's also important for the audience to note that, South Africa allows dual citizenship. Most of the European Union countries does as well. And dual does not necessarily have to mean that you can only have 2 citizenships or 2 passports, but it's multiple. So it would be good to understand fully the family situation and the goals to base advice, but certainly in addition with what Andrew said, one needs to almost look at your goal, look at all the different countries and what they can offer to ultimately make the right decision.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. Richard, question for you. If I were to retire to Mauritius and stay there for, say, a period of 1 year, will I then be allowed to buy a property other than the specified non-citizen foreigner property in the specified schemes? Or will I only be able to buy general other properties once I am a citizen of Mauritius?
Okay, so the law is such that as a non-Mauritian citizen, you can only buy within the designated developments that are allowed for foreigners and that give you permanent residency status. Once you achieve permanent residency status, you still cannot buy any property on the island. They've really, and even if you acquire, only when you acquire citizenship can you then purchase any property on the island. And they really introduced that when they launched the scheme 20 years ago as a mechanism to not outprice the local guys on the island. You can imagine that if they opened up the entire island, it would have been sold off very quickly with high rises all around the coastline. And that would have fundamentally changed the local market fundamentals. So they've kept to that ruling. So only if you're a citizen can you then buy individual housing, essentially.
Okay, excellent. Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Malcolm, there's I've got 2 questions for you. The one is quite an interesting one, which somebody asked Daniel. He said, it's not you, Daniel, in the US, it's Daniel Baderman. He said, what is the difference between Portugal and Greece? Now, I think I would have said, what is the difference between Cyprus and Greece, not Portugal and Greece? And I don't know if he was talking about culture, but I think probably intimating in terms of the program, but then also adding on to Portugal in terms of what are the healthcare benefits of the Golden Visa. And I also welcome Amanda and also Andrew to weigh in, on that as well. So maybe, I don't know, it's a bit of a strange one, Portugal and Greece. Do you want to have a crack at that one? Or
Yeah, I'll have a bit of a crack at the second one and leave it to the experts, Andrew and Amanda, maybe to compare Greece with Portugal. But I guess, I think that I come back to my point about trying to weigh up all these different options. The big plus is Portugal's healthcare system is outstanding. In fact, the COVID situation has emphasized that. Forbes magazine from Daniel's part of the world has recommended Portugal as the most attractive post-COVID place to retire in the world. Not only because of the cohesive society of Portugal and the way, which is probably a little bit different to Greece, but they're a very cohesive, law-abiding country. They were in lockdown before they were even told to go into lockdown, and their healthcare system really works extremely well, both the public and the private care available. So those Golden Visa buyers do access that system, and I think they can take great comfort from the fact that's what they get in Portugal. Just exactly how the two schemes or programs work between the two countries, I'm afraid I can't comment.
Okay. Do you want to just add in there, Andrew and Amanda? Do you want to, in terms of the healthcare benefits of the Golden Visa?
I don't know, Andrew, would you like me to quickly go?
Yeah, you go first.
Yes,
you can talk.
Ladies first. Stand back.
I think so. The fundamental difference between the Portugal Golden Visa and the Greece Golden Visa, first of all, would be the investment threshold. We know that Portugal is 500,000. Yes, there are alternative requirements where it can be reduced versus a property investment in Greece at a requirement of 250,000 euros. Both will provide you with a residency permit, allowing you to permanently reside in that specific country. One difference, though, between Portugal and Greece from an employment point of view is that when you acquire a Portuguese Golden Visa, you can work and study and do whatever you basically want to do in Portugal, besides the fact that you cannot vote because you're not a citizen. In Cyprus, you're not allowed to work in the open market. However, you can establish a company and draw down from the dividends. Both will allow you visa-free travel in the Schengen area. But the biggest difference between the two really is that I've explained previously that Portugal essentially is a 5-year residency permit, after which you obtain eligibility to apply for citizenship, albeit that you need to be able to speak Portuguese, versus Greece, where after having held your residency permit for 7 years, you can also apply for citizenship. But of course, you must be able to speak Greek. So, that's sometimes a very difficult challenge. So people say, I'd rather learn to speak Portuguese than Greece. But of course, they will provide you with very good benefits and quite a lot of similarities.
Okay, well, that's all Greek to Andrew. Andrew, what do you say?
Listen, I'm a sailor, so I would love to go and live in Greece. But I think this is a real estate investment webinar, and I think from a real estate investment point of view, I think Portugal stacks up, in my opinion, far better than Greece. The one thing that has really amazed me about Portugal is it's got an incredible tax system. If you go to a restaurant and you want to expense that bill for entertainment or whatever, you've got to give your fiscal number to the waiter, and they will put that into their little machine, and that's the only way you can claim it. And everything, if you're self-employed in Portugal and you invoice a company, that invoice was actually issued from the tax authorities, what they call a green receipt. Malcolm sort of touched on it jokingly. We all know what happened when we had the financial crisis and the whole Greek bailout situation a few years ago. The Greeks are not famous for paying tax. And at the end of the day, I think it's really important. As South Africans, we're looking for stability if we're looking for a plan B. And if you were to compare the two, absolutely no doubt, I would go for Portugal over Greece.
Can I just pick up?
That's putting my neck out. Sorry.
Yes, okay, right. Malcolm, yeah, just weigh in there.
Can I just pick up on one of Andrew's points? I mean, as an accountant myself, I understand a little bit about tax, or I used to. But, you know, I think that speaks to this very strong law-abiding culture in Portugal. And as Andrew said, I think for South Africans, what we're wanting more than anything, if we are thinking about moving, is stability and certainty as much as possible. But the other great interesting thing from a tax point of view is this non-habitual residency program, which Portugal offers for those folks who 5-6 years from now decide to financially immigrate and move tax residency from South Africa to Portugal. And, you know, it applies to all foreigners. And there's been a major attraction from places like France with this very, very tough tax regime. For 10 years, there's a moratorium on tax payable on foreign income in Portugal. So a South African who enters in Plan B in 5-6 years from now, gets the residency, goes to live in Portugal. For 10 years, he or she pays no tax. Obviously, you pay tax at source. So if you're earning rental income in South Africa on your property portfolio that you've left behind, you'll pay tax on source in South Africa. But you'll have zero tax as a tax resident in Portugal, a new tax resident, having not lived in the country for the previous 5 years. You're now living there for the next 10 years, zero tax on foreign income, on top of which, if you're in certain professions working in Portugal, there's a cap rate of 20%. So you could even there's a major focus on the software industry in Portugal. That's where they're looking for the next wave, particularly in Lisbon. So if you're let's say an IT guy, or person working for a corporate even in Lisbon, for 10 years, your tax rate in Lisbon, in Portugal, is capped at 20%. So these are very, very attractive systems that really go around the Golden Visa program and have been a real reason for the stability of the economy, the growth rate in the property industry, and the attraction of South Africans and others wanting to get a European passport off the back of Portugal.
Great, thanks. Okay, I want to welcome. I'm going to actually ask you to ask another question, because the one it's actually related. We're coming to our last few questions, by the way, so I'd just like to get that, and then we get to our wrap up, where we ask each one of the panelists just to give a wrap up. But it's from an anonymous attendee, and it says that I have a New Zealand citizenship. My question is whether the property market in New Zealand is likely to show better growth from an investment perspective, as opposed to investing in, let's say, Portugal, Berlin, or one of the other fast-growing cities globally. And obviously, they're punting for New Zealand by the sounds of things. It says Auckland is currently showing high growth. So there's a lot of arguments that we can put into that. I don't know who wants to give some comments on that. Would you like to comment on that, perhaps, Malcolm?
Yeah, look, I think it would be interesting to put that out to the real experts, and I don't pretend to be one. But I don't see Auckland, having been there recently. I know Auckland prices are very high. I know there's been a huge impact in Auckland from the Chinese community from Southeast Asia buying into places like Auckland and Melbourne and Sydney and other parts. So I would be a little bit cautious, but again, I don't understand. Interesting, if I look at the experts, Knight Frank, Savills, people of that ilk, PricewaterhouseCoopers, their emerging trends in European markets, I don't see any reference to Auckland, but I don't know, one would have to have a good look. I think in trying to understand and make a comparison, one would have to clearly get a bit of due diligence going on and get the experts to make the comparisons. But I'd be surprised if a city like Auckland can offer the sort of returns we're talking at, particularly when you're borrowing money at 1%. And you're looking at both capital growth and leverage yields of around 8-9%. I'd be very surprised if you can get that in a city like Auckland.
Absolutely. Interesting. My good friend Dolph DeRoos, he immigrated from Auckland to, in fact, from South Island, New Zealand, Canterbury, to America, which is in Daniel's backyard. But anyway, he wanted to live the big wide world and experience business and everything else. But so on that note, gentlemen, what I'm going to ask each one of you, and of course, lady Amanda, the rose amongst the thorns over here, I'm going to ask each one of you to give round about a wrap up, your final thoughts, your parting thoughts, in terms of, why it's such a great place to invest on your side, and what your just tell us more about your program. Leave somebody with something that they can take away and say, wow, that's something that I need to consider. Starting with you, Daniel.
Well, thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. I would say two things. One is, I think Malcolm hit it on the head. There is so much to evaluate. There's so many decisions. There's so many data points to look at. And I would just say, take your time. Number one, calm down. I do agree with the poll. I think most of the clients we're working with, the safety and government instability is the primary reason people in South Africa seem to be talking to us. But mostly the reason people come to America through our program is to educate their children. I think it's for their children's future, not only the education, but the job opportunities after they graduate from a university. They can stay in America and work for an American corporation, which now we all know has become global, and we're a global marketplace. So the reason people should contact my firm is because we're stable, we're not developers, we're fund managers, we've helped 700 families, and I think we have a long 46-year track record that we can back up, and we're very high on integrity.
Great stuff, Daniel. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you for that wrap up. Thank you for all the insights here on the EB5, and also thank you for getting up so early in the morning. I mean, I think you got up at 3:30, 4 o'clock. So thank you for that.
Well, it's amazing what a quadruple espresso can do. It's quite. It helps.
Fantastic. Richard, do you want to give us your wrap up, please?
Thanks, Neil. I just wanted to touch on what a few of the panelists mentioned about, having to choose what program to ultimately settle on. And it is an exceptionally difficult thing to do. And if I look across the schemes, they're not necessarily competing with one another. They have different objectives, and they have different, whether that's financial, whether that's residency or citizenship, or whether that's lifestyle. Now, when I look at Mauritius, I'll always like to term it the good all-rounder, because it sort of fits in the middle of a reasonably good long-term investment. We've seen that over the last, I did an exercise over the last 6 years. We've seen 5% capital growth over the last 6 years from people buying off plan and development. Then you've got the long-term rental yields at about 4%. Then you've got the permanent residency component, and then you've got the lifestyle and the weather, and it's a nice place to live. And when you sort of wrap all of that up, Mauritius becomes quite a strong contender. And I've just had a friend of mine go through that exact process, and they went across all the schemes, and eventually they came back and said, listen, I've spent a year doing this, and I've settled on Mauritius because of those factors, but also because it's close to home. And that was, after a year of lots of research. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Richard. It's wonderful having you on the show. Thank you once again for joining us. And I think you certainly caught Daniel's eye because he likes the concept of this island living style, and he's sitting in the United States. So
I'm in Florida, and I should have a picture like him. I don't know why my picture is not his.
Amanda, will you give us your wrap up, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much, Neil. So I think we're talking about property investment. So definitely from a South African point of view, it is important for us to diversify some of our assets offshore. We know that we've been doing it for many years. And investing or diversifying your assets offshore into real estate investment is a clever idea. It has always been a very good, solid investment. But if you combine your real estate investment offshore with residency or citizenship, then of course it's a much smarter move, because then you get all the additional benefits. And then I would like to just leave the audience with the thought that, of course, it is important that you consult with an expert. At Henley & Partners, I did mention before that we are the leaders in this industry. We have been so for many, many years. We have an office in South Africa, in Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg, and then an office in each and every country where there's a program on offer. So it's good to consult with somebody to understand, your family structure, what your ultimate goals are. At Henley & Partners, of course, we don't focus on one specific product or one specific country, but it is ultimately an advisory and a consultation process. And yes, of course, ultimately, we do provide the clients with the full assistance throughout the entire program. Thank you very much for the opportunity again, Neil.
No, well, thank you, Amanda. I think we needed to get definitely some female representation here, and you've managed to bring that to us. So thank you, but thank you more importantly for your insights. I think very interesting to have a sort of a global view on what's happening in each of the countries and looking at all the different programs. Okay, so on that note, thank you once again, Amanda. And then, of course, Andrew, can you give us your wrap up, please?
Neil, thank you. Yeah, I mean, look, from a perspective, I think we really focus on 5 of these programs, Portugal being the most interesting one. Just from a sheer volume point of view, we've, I think, helped in excess of 200 families now with the Portuguese program. But what I would rather sort of speak about in my wrap up is one's approach. So have a clear understanding of what your objectives are. Sit down with somebody who's got financial planning skills, understanding the relationship between your investment in South Africa and offshore, and how that impacts you from a tax and an estate planning point of view. Really important. There are lots of guys flying in with shiny shoes, with big promises for South Africans. They're preying on emotional people. Take your time. Don't rush, and understand that if you work through a company like Sable, it's a 6-7 year relationship. Make sure that you're dealing with somebody who's local, accountable, or has local representation, that they've got a good track record. And very, very importantly with these programs is ask the hard questions when you're looking at the underlying real estate investment. We partner with 19 different real estate partners in our one market. We've got several in the other markets we deal with. We don't work just with one person. Understand what the property market, per square meter, what are you paying in Lisbon? Are you overpaying because this is ticking a box for citizenship or residency? There's a lot of that happens where people have bought properties for 500,000 euros just to meet the criteria. And I can tell you that in my knowledge of the property market in Lisbon, they've overpaid. And that's important, because your investment's always going to be determined about how well you buy when it comes to exit time. And what is your exit plan? We've had, anecdotally, 3 or 4 clients have had to leave various programs for personal reasons 2-3 years in. And can they actually sell that investment? Or is this really designed just for people who are looking to buy a citizenship or a residency? Very, very important considerations. And make sure it's fair value, and again, understanding the track record. If you were going to buy a property from the Rabi Group in Century City, you're pretty safe. I mean, he's got a great track record. So, it's as Malcolm said, work with people you can trust. Be careful of the guys who fly in with big numbers, 10% returns. And also ask the agents who you're dealing with what commission they earn. Very important, because there's some developers in some of these eastern islands and places offering 12%. Now, if you're offering an agent 12% commission, my question would be, really, is that investment a good investment? Because if somebody's got that kind of margin in a deal, I think to me that sounds overpriced. So ask hard questions, never ever be shy. And my advice is be careful with your rands, they're hard earned. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Andrew. I think a nice way to wrap up. Thank you for your contribution to the panel. Been great. And last but not least, Malcolm, you got the final word, Malcolm. You got yeah. Do you want to give us your wrap up?
Well, I'll be brief, Neil. Thank you for your comments, Andrew. I think there's a word, reputation, which comes to mind here. We're in a fortunate position. I think as South Africans, no different to any other nation, we like to deal with people that sort of talk the same way without being in any way prejudicial, but people who come from the same background who we can identify with. What's been really helpful for us, and I just want to make a strong point, maybe different to Daniel, is the fact that we're the developer is one of our points of departure, which has really attracted people. We're not selling development finance and asking people to help us get the cost of project finance, development finance down. Not at all. We're selling a piece of brick and mortar, an apartment, based on a 40-year track record in South Africa. So the database that's followed my partner, Johnny Ravi, is exactly that. Reputation is so important, that you're dealing with somebody or people that you really feel you can trust. And when we talk about a yield of 4% guaranteed and low interest rates of 1%, we do it with absolute confidence that that's the way it is. Location, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So I think that is really an important criteria. And quite frankly, don't underestimate the importance of the fact that, as you say, Andrew says, you're parting with hard-earned rands, especially if you're up at the 10 million rand mark, 500,000 euros. Please make sure, take your time and make sure that you're investing that money into a sound property.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that, Malcolm. And thank you to all of the panelists. Daniel Ryan of Atlantic American Partners in the US. Wonderful having you. Amanda Smith of Henley and Partners, Richard Haller of Pan Golding Mauritius, Andrew Rissick of Sable International, and of course Malcolm Lobben of New World. It's wonderful having each and every single one of you here on the panel. And I'd like to thank you. And of course, for you, the audience, thank you very much for staying with us till the end. And for those of you who want to get the recording of this webinar, you can get the replay on the REMAG website under shows. You just click on webinars. We will post it within the next day or so. We have a big following and a lot of requests for people asking for that, for the replays. So just go to the REI MAG website and you can get the replays there. So just some reminders. Don't forget to join us for our next week's webinar. It's the same time next week, and I think we're going local next week. It'll either be between Eugene Boniface of Elan, or it could be Derek Watts, and I know we're back local. But we do have an international virtual masterclass for offshore property investors. And of course, we would like each one of you, the panelists today, to be involved on that one. So maybe just pencil that into your diaries. We'll come back to you with more information exactly on the program, which we're just busy finalizing right now. But it's going to be from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and it's going to be on Wednesday, the 11th of November. And there is a link below for those people that want to get onto that webinar. We would like to get each one of you on the panel here today to get involved. So thank you very much. It would be wonderful to have you on that particular webinar as well. And yes, thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next week. I always leave with an inspirational quote. And I've got one from Michael Uncle Jordan, because, some people are going through a little bit of tough times here and there. So I said, he made quite an incredible, profound statement where, as a sportsman, he said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed. And I think I'll leave you with that great inspirational quote for today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.